Hi, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Wednesday, here we are, November 5th. Can you believe it? We've got 2 months left in the year. And we are going to talk today about Mamdani. He just won in New York, and what happened in Virginia, everybody knows, but the conservatives, or the Republicans, I should say, lost. What does it all mean? I actually have a lot of thoughts on this, and it's been bubbling up in my mind lately regarding women and this trend of women voting left and identifying more as left. It's much more than politics. It has to do with culture and identity. So we're going to get into that in today's episode. Also, I had some interesting conversations on X recently regarding the, I think, fallout after Charlie Kirk's horrific murder, and people that are now trying to take on, in a way, his platform, or take on now leadership on what is called the right. And I have some thoughts on that too. So welcome back to the Lila Rose Show. We're doing a live here. I will keep an eye on the chat too for anybody joining. If you want to make some comments here, I will be keeping an eye on it. But what does everybody think about Mamdani? That's what the wall-to-wall coverage is about. He's a self-proclaimed democratic socialist. He just won big in New York City. Now remember, Mamdani was running against two other hard leftists, Andrew Cuomo, who is a hardcore pro-abort. So it's not as if Mamdani had lost to Cuomo, that would have somehow been a win. But it is interesting that Mamdani won, especially how he won hard with women, especially young women. In fact, he got 81% of the young female vote, which is wild. So I want to take a look at this. This is actually a video I want to watch first about Mamdani. I do think that his democratic socialism that he presents is so appealing to younger groups, especially women, because he's basically saying that we're going to solve all the economic issues and no one's going to be hungry. No one's going to be without childcare. Everyone's going to be happy. Let's take a listen to how he was communicating this. This is from a clip just a few weeks ago during his campaign.
To afford the more than 12% increase in rent-stabilized apartments under this Mayor Adams administration, and struggle to afford what has now grown more than $20,000 a year in childcare costs. And so what we are releasing today is the cost saved calculator, where you can go to Zohran for nyc.com/calculator and see just how much each of these big three items will save you in your lives. Because when it comes to free buses, each rider will save over $2,000 a year. That's $1.3 billion a year for all riders. When it comes to universal childcare, we're speaking about $22,200 a year, which together is $5.5 billion for every New Yorker across this city. And when it comes to a rent freeze, we are speaking about $1,750 saved every single year. And together that amounts to more than $1.7 billion in its first year.
So we can pause it. So I want to point out a few things. First of all, how this is going to be paid for, of course, is not typically part of the conversation with Mamdani, and he doesn't really have the power to raise state taxes. He's just a mayor. He's not the governor. He doesn't hold any other elected office for the entire state of New York. It's just New York City. So there's, of course, the question of what's that going to look like financially for the city. But look at Mamdani. Look, he's a charismatic guy. He's very cheerful. He talks with a lot of inspiring language. He has this very positive sounding message, and he's hitting pain points. He's hitting free daycare. He's hitting free buses. He's hitting rent control for sort of the working class, you could say, of New York. Now, it's interesting. I was looking at a study here that said that people that are New York natives, only 50%, or it was, I think, 40% only voted for Mamdani. But when they came in the last 5 years, to the last just year or two, to New York City, those groups of people voted in much greater numbers for Mamdani versus Cuomo. So that was an interesting note, that people that are new to New York and maybe aren't as wise to how New York runs and what are the real costs of the government providing everything for free, those people were less likely to vote for Mamdani. But it's undeniable that Mamdani had this very winsome message, especially with younger women. And we're going to unpack that today because I think it's really important. And I think that, you know, we talk about politics on the show. More than that, we talk about culture on the show and our personal responsibility. But I think that we do have a personal responsibility for people who care about culture and politics to see what's happening with younger women today and to make a difference in that space. And that's part of the mission of the show, by the way. So we're going to deep dive that. But before I get more into that, and another note, as I said earlier, in Virginia, which used to be a red state, it used to have a red governor, it used to have a Republican governor. In Virginia, young women also helped vote in the Democrat governor, as well as a Democrat AG, Attorney General, Jay Jones. And this is a guy that was really racked with scandal. I mean, he actually had a series of text messages that were leaked where he was threatening political violence against his political opponents as a joke in text message. And even people on the left and the right were decrying this. And Jay Jones still won definitively with young women. So what is going on here? Why are American women, especially younger women, veering hard left? How do we solve this? What are the underlying motivations and reasons for this? That's what we're going to be exploring here. Before that, though, I want to talk really quick about something happening on X right now. If you're not on X a lot, I'm sorry if this is like, what are you even talking about, Lila? I totally missed this entire kerfuffle, but I wanted to address it. So on X right now, I tweeted something. Let's pull up my tweet, Harris, if we can. So this was just yesterday. And this was regarding a New York Times profile that came out, I believe, yesterday, regarding a streamer, podcaster who's been around now for, I think, almost a decade, many years, but he's a younger guy. And he has been ultimately ascending, you could say, in growing an audience, especially of younger men. So this is, again, part of that, the divide of the sexes, men, women veering more left, men veering more what they call alt-right. So this was my tweet. You can pull it up here. I said, the New York Times taking glamour shots of a self-proclaimed admirer of Adolf Hitler as a possible successor to Charlie Kirk. Well, they religiously avoided featuring Charlie Kirk during his life is peak leftist propaganda. It adds insult to injury that Charlie intentionally shunned the Hitler admirer. Now, if you're listening to this on podcast later, you're like, what are you even talking about? Let's pull up the New York Times article so we know what I'm talking about. This was an opinion piece that came out now 2 days ago. On Tuesday of this week. Nick Fuentes was Charlie Kirk's bitter enemy. Now he's becoming his successor. And you'll see if you scroll down here, Harris. Oh, you're not able to see it. Let me screenshot this for you and send it. There is a kind of like a glamour shot of this person, Fuentes, in the New York Times article. Now, the reason that this really caught my eye is the fact that when Charlie was alive, and I knew because I would pay attention to this, there were very rarely anything close to positive pieces about Charlie Kirk in the New York Times. Occasionally they would reference his work, but they very rarely would sort of note him as some rising influential figure that people were attracted to. They wanted Charlie to look sidelined and not attractive to people. And so when they would present him in their reporting, it was always with a negative frame and never with a picture like this one. So you can pull this down now, Harris. But this is what you would call a glamour shot from the New York Times of again, as they call him, an alt-right. You can put whatever title you want on it, but a growing in popularity streamer and podcaster who is saying that he's on the right. He says that he's Catholic, is my understanding. He says that he's even opposed to things like abortion and transing the children, is my understanding. But he also makes these jokes, and he also says he actually thinks we are too negative about the legacy of people like, yes, Adolf Hitler. And so I think that this is an example, and I bring this up, of, yes, media spin, which is something I'm always interested in because I've been the victim of media spin. Most people on the right have been the victim of media spin. But this is a particularly perverse version because they're basically propping up somebody who does make light of the Holocaust, who does do that because they're trying to stick it to the Jewish people. I mean, it's a whole part of his whole shtick. And they're trying to prop that up as the new face of the right, essentially. When the reality is, even Charlie Kirk, especially Charlie Kirk, was so passionately against this worldview and so much against even this individual and his representation of worldview that he didn't even want this person at his events. He wouldn't give him a platform. He said, you're not welcome here because being anti-Semitic, being racist, being misogynistic is wrong. It violates principles that are on the right. The deeper question, of course, is what are the principles that should govern the right? I mean, what are the principles that should govern Republican Party? As you all know, I got in a lot of heat last year for opposing President Trump's, at the time, some of the pro-abortion lean that he was going during his campaign, like coming out against Amendment 4 in Florida, which would basically allow for abortions up until birth. And he said he wasn't sure he would come out against it, and then later on he did, but that was only after he got criticized for it. So if we don't have principles on the right, if we give 1 inch of ground to things like the killing of babies, to things like racism, whether that's racism directed at the Jewish people or racism directed at any group. And I would say that includes, of course, people in Gaza. Any form of racism is evil and wrong, or it's misogyny, or it's misandry. It's the hatred towards men or the hatred towards women. None of that can survive, should be able to survive on the right or what is the right anymore. If the right becomes that, I don't want anything to do with it, right? And most, I think, people who aren't on X every day and, steeped in this stuff would be like, yeah, I don't want to be part of that. So it's so important that we do have principles. If you are conservative, that we have foundational principles, that we don't compromise on them. Principles matter. And I think that is the way, too, to win back the youth vote, is by having principles. Keep in mind, Zohran Mamdani said he had principles. That's what he said. Now, when it comes to life, he was raging pro-abort, although he always said it with nice language, so it didn't sound bad. That's part of the sleight of hand, right? Oh, I support women's reproductive rights. Well, he supports abortion until birth. I support, the rights of LGBTQ plus people to exist and be, love is love. Well, he actually supports dismantling the traditional family, which is what he ultimately ran on. But he couched it in nice language, right? So there's two things that the conservative movement has to do. We have to stand on principle, and then we have to do it with joy and do it with winsomeness and persuasiveness, make persuasion our aim while standing on principle. So you can't compromise principle for the sake of persuasion. And you also can't be persuasive and, say I'm all of these things, but then ultimately not care about your principles. You have to care about both the principles and the persuasion. Or I should say you can't care about the principles and then not care about persuasion, and you can't be persuasive and then reject the principles. So it has to be both. So I just wanted to share that because I am seeing this tension. It's on the left too, by the way. The left is having their own identity crisis, but I'm seeing this tension on the right. And it is so important to have both principles and persuasion. But what I really wanted to get into was this phenomenon of women voting left, especially younger women, and why that is. And I actually had an experience recently, personally, that I thought was really illuminating for me to see this in real time. Before we do that, though, we're going to do a quick thank you to two of our amazing sponsors who make this show possible. So we'll give them a shout out now.
As you may know, porn addiction is on the rise for both women and men today. The porn industry is $1 billion industry preying off of vulnerable men and women. The good news is that there is a solution, and our show is proud to partner with CovenantEyes.com. CovenantEyes.com is not only something to block explicit material on your phone, your tablet, or your laptop, but CovenantEyes.com is also a community to give you strength to choose good things instead of to choose the destruction of porn. Whether you're a parent protecting your kids, a husband searching for accountability, or a wife searching for accountability, or somebody who just wants to make sure that porn doesn't make it onto your screen, CovenantEyes.com has got you covered. So you can go to CovenantEyes.com and get a free 30-day trial using the code LILA. That's CovenantEyes.com. Use the code LILA for a free 30-day trial. Start your journey to freedom today.
Did you know that your health insurance plan likely covers abortion, abortifacients, and other unethical services? Most people have no idea that they're footing the bill for procedures that go directly against their beliefs. While there are health sharing ministries, some families need and want standard insurance. That's why I'm so excited to share about Presidio Healthcare, the nation's first pro-life Christian health insurance company. That's right, Christian health insurance, the first pro-life option that is not a health sharing ministry. If you're in Texas, visit PresidioCare.com. That's PRESIDIO care.com to get your quote today. If you're in another state, you can join the wait list and check out Presidio's nationwide pro-life provider tool at ProLifeProviders.com. Help bring life-affirming healthcare to the rest of the country. Go to PresidioCare.com. All right, you guys. So as everyone knows, Zohran Mamdani won big in New York City yesterday for mayor. He is a Democratic socialist, very pro-abortion, very anti-marriage. And then in Virginia, we had some big losses as well. Two very pro-abort folks, one for AG and the governor, and for governor. And that's also a huge disappointment. When you're looking at the exit polling, we see that women, especially younger women, were big shower-uppers for these candidates. And actually, I'm going to pull up that data really quick. Harris, if you scroll back up, young women voted in Virginia for the Democrat candidates. If you pull up the X post here from Election Whiz, It is the one right before my X post. Thank you so much. Okay, so this right here, as you guys can see, is well, this is an interesting one. This one right here shows you that it is a huge cohort of young women, the younger women who voted for Mamdani against Cuomo. Now, part of that could have been, by the way, Cuomo had the whole sexual harassment scandal associated with his cabinet, basically, in years past. So that might have turned them against him. But I do think Mamdani, just being young, charismatic, he had TikTok girls making videos for him, all of that. I think that helped him a lot. Can you pull up, though, this election alert, CNN, Virginia Attorney General exit poll by gender? Let's pull that up. It's right above, you got it? Okay, great. So this is something that I think is really concerning and people should notice. Men favored Mayares. He was up for the AG by 58%, 18 points, and women favored Jones by 12 points. So 12% more women, Jay Jones, the Democrat AG candidate, won women by 12 points. I think that's really significant. And all of this is significant. Okay, so why? Why is it happening? Pull up this meme for us, actually, Harris, because I do think, just to close off what I was talking about X earlier in my X post. All right, this is not why I think this is happening, guys, in a whole story, but this is one element that I think is worth looking at. This is a meme that's going around, women voting Republican, and then you see that they get shot by Republicans who embrace Fuentes. Why would women vote against us? Cry, cry. That, by the way, is not what I think was motivating women going in and voting for Jay Jones and Mamdani. They weren't thinking about that. They probably don't even know who Fuentes is. But I do think it is unhelpful on the right, obviously, to bash women, to platform and embrace misogyny. It's very unhelpful. So if women don't want to vote for that in the long run, that's going to be why. I mean, that will be a big reason why. But there's a lot of other reasons why. So let's go into what of those other reasons are. Okay, understanding is the first step to wisdom. In order to understand what's happening in the world, you have to look around and understand the data and look at people's experiences. It is a fact that there is a rise today in women who don't want to have children. There is a rise today in women who want to be dinks. There is a rise today in women who don't want to get married. It's very sad and disturbing, all of this happening. I was recently on a podcast. I did this debate for over 2 hours on the Ellen Fisher podcast. Shout out to Ellen. She's a great friend. And I debated this young woman, I think she was in her 30s, younger woman, who is a self-professed dink, dual income, no kids. She was advocating for other women to be dinks. She has a podcast where she promotes the dink lifestyle. Here's a little clip from the promo clip from our debate. And this woman has an entire brand about why and how you should be a dink. Now, she would even say in my debate with her, oh, I'm not telling women they have to be a dink. It's all about women's choice, right? That was kind of the refrain. It's all about women's choice. But it's very clear that by her choosing that and by her recommending that to other women, that is part of her whole persuasion that campaign she's undergoing, which is let's try to get more women to see the upside of being a dink. So what are the numbers here? According to a Michigan State study, the percentage of U.S. non-parents who say they don't want any children rose from 14% in 2002 to 29% in 2023. That's so wild. That is so wild. The amount of people who say non-parents, so Americans who aren't parents yet, who say they don't want any children went from 14% to 29%. It doubled from 2002 to 2023. Among that cohort, U.S. adults younger than 50 who don't want to have children, and they share that they are unlikely ever to have children, increased from 2018, so it's been speeding up in just the last 5, 6, 7 years, from 37% in 2018 to 47% in 2023. So this is for both men and women, but I'm going to get to specifically the women in a minute. The amount of young people who want to have kids is declining sharply. As you may all know, the birth rate has basically gone off of a cliff. So the amount of women now who are having children today versus really any other time is at its lowest. The birth rate, I think, is 1.8. It is below replacement rate. I think it might be 1.7 now. It is below replacement rate. So replacement rate for a population is 2.1. You need 2.1 children per couple or two people to at least replace the population. And we are below that. The only reason that we are not experiencing severe economic collapse in the United States because of the decline in population is because of immigration, which is wild. And it's not because of any other reason. We are only able to replace ourselves as a population right now because of immigration. That's the only reason. We are not wanting to have kids. We are not having kids. That is largely the state of the culture today. Now, there's a lot of good trends of people finding faith again, people wanting to get married again. So there's positive trends that are happening amid all of this chaos. But the reality is we are at a low point in birth rate, unlike we've ever seen before in our history. So what are the fears driving this? Why is this happening? And I'm going to just give some theories here. I'm not going to pretend to have all of the answers and present them perfectly. But I do have some theories about why this is happening, why we're seeing this then show up in politics as these votes for these far left figures who promise the moon and back and who are super pro sexual libertinism, super pro abortion, and then why and how we can solve for this. So I think one foundational issue is the sexual revolution. We talk about this a lot on the show, as you guys know, but the whole idea that your life is about you and sexual pleasure at your fingertips whenever you want, as long as there's consent between adults, you're good. I think that is a huge foundational piece of why people think they wouldn't want to have kids, get married, etc. Because for them, life is about pleasure. Life is about what I want. It's about my autonomy. It's about my own ideas. It's not about any sort of ordering to relationships. And that's really toxic as a worldview. It's very damaging as a worldview. And it came up in my debate with this young woman who was the dink side of the debate, because she would say in the conversation that she wanted her lifestyle, that she wanted the lifestyle that she had. She wanted to be able to, she didn't want to be up at night with a baby. She wanted to be able to go on vacations. She wanted to be able to have more money, have a better lifestyle, and kids would be a drain on that. And so in her mind, okay, well, then I'm not going to have kids. That was kind of but that was part of the calculation for her. So sexual revolution is really what broke the American mind 50 years ago on this question of what is my life's purpose. Instead of my life's purpose is about love and about relationship and maybe getting married one day and having children, my life's purpose is now about like what I want sexually, and I get to be free, and sex is no longer tied to procreation or intimacy and lifelong love. And so now it's a free-for-all. And we're seeing the fruit of that. We're seeing the free-for-all happening right now. And so there's that piece of it, but then there's another piece of it too. And that, I would say, is the economic piece. And I think this is where conservatives would do well to emphasize what the right can offer the American family and individual to make it easier for them to live and to have a family and to have children. Because I think there's a lot of fear today around motherhood because of a concern for it being able to be affordable, for them to be able to be in healthy relationships that can last, to be able to raise those children and be able to handle the pressures of being a mom or a dad. And I speak for dads too, because I think they have their own set of concerns, but statistically women have them more. And women, of course, are the ones that carry a life and usually do most of the caretaking for the younger children. That's biologically how we're wired. That's a beautiful thing, but it's also it's being seen as a burden now. And so underlying, I think the reason Mamdani won, free daycare, free buses, rent control, free everything. And underlying this trend towards not wanting to have kids, towards being dinks, towards rejecting marriage and motherhood is the fear that I can't handle it, that I don't have what it takes. And so either someone else has to come in and be my knight in shining armor like Mamdani, effectively. And even then I have autonomy, so I can choose not to have a baby. It's up to me. My women's rights, right? And I will be just as happy being completely unburdened by family and marriage and children. But that is ultimately, I think, a huge reason why women are choosing to vote left and to also reject motherhood is fear, economic fear. We've been trained to be selfish by the sexual revolution and by being miseducated by our academics. The family formation today is bad, broken families, all of that. So we've been trained to view ourselves as really life is about us and what I want, and we're not going to find meaning in relationships. It's really my own self-determination. And then there is the economic fears, and there's the economic crisis. Now, I do think, I sometimes, when I think about the fact, and there's some great social data about this, world hunger is at an all-time low globally. The amount of, what it means to be poor today in America is actually other nations' wealth, right? So even the poor in America, compared to a lot of other nations, are wealthier than many nations throughout the world. So I think another factor here connected to economics and sort of our idea of wealth and our idea of, do we have enough? Do we have what it takes to have a family, et cetera, is also expectations around lifestyle. And think about that for a minute. Social media, marketing, media in general, has given all of these expectations to both women and men about what it means to even be successful or be able to have a family or be able to be a mother or a father. We see constantly consumerism and materialism presented as the end game, as the success story. And so you connect economic challenges, difficulty to even buy a home in today's economy for most people, student loan debt, inflation. You connect that, the dual income trap, as Elizabeth Warren called it over 20 years ago, where now you need to have two incomes to be able to support a household often in this country. That's at least the experience of many people. And you connect all of that to also people having this vision of, well, if I'm going to have kids and a family, I need a 5-bedroom house or whatever it is. I need to have the latest, whatever thing is being marketed to me on Instagram. I need to have all of that. It feels like an impossible situation for a lot of people. It feels impossible, especially when they have the student loan debt piece of it for those that have that. And so people are legitimately wrestling with what am I going to do? How can I do this? And why would I even want to do this to begin with? What is in it for me? I think is a lot of people are saying. So what can we do about this? What's the solution? I do have some solutions. There is hope, I think. I have some solutions. So I do think that the conservative movement can absolutely crush this. I think we can. I think if we present a positive, joyful view of supporting the American family, supporting the job of mothers and fathers in this economy, and communicate effectively how a smaller government, give back the taxes, don't tax more, how a more empowered family, American family and small community can actually have thriving families, presenting that vision, I think, is part of the winning strategy. And what that looks like is talking about how we can make costs lower for American families. I think births should be free. I think that we should be giving more tax credits and cash credits to families that have children. It should be actually honored in our government. If you're going to have a children, it should not just be one little tax write-off or deduction on your taxes, but you should actually be given a cash credit for children, having multiple children. Instead of making daycare free, why don't we give money back to mothers so that they can raise their own children in their homes instead of having to go pay a job to then go drop the child off at daycare? Why not instead just giving the mother money directly so that she doesn't even have to enter into that part of the workforce and that can support the American family? There's a lot of creative things that conservatives can do in our governmental policies to make America a healthier and happier place to raise a family. I do think MAHA is part of that, Make America Healthy Again, better policies there. The Food and Drug Administration, I think, is already doing some work in that space. But by the way, we should absolutely have already banned the abortion drug. If you want to make American families healthier, selling abortion drugs that kill babies is obviously not a way to do that. I digress, that's another point. But I think conservatives should be emphasizing pro-family policy. Mamdani basically won because of his representation of what is effectively, I think many people experienced it as pro-family policy. I mean, that might sound crazy to people, but I think that's a big reason why he won. Everything was going to be better for you individually and for your families because of me, Mamdani. And women, especially younger women, bought that hook, line, and sinker. They just ate that up. They're like, this sounds great. And yes, there's some bad motivations in there. I think selfishness is a problem today and sexual libertinism is a problem today. But there's also that universal human desire to be able to flourish. That's how we're designed, and to be able to make a way in this world and be able to have a house over our heads and food on the table. And if we have children, to have it for them. Conservatives can win that game because it is better economic policy to have a freer market than a less free market, just speaking very generally here, of course. And it is a generally better policy to tax less and empower people more to be able to build their own families, businesses, everything else. That's what we should be celebrating and championing as conservatives. I think another thing we can do is encourage businesses to be more pro-family and flexible work hours, including for moms and dads, by the way. Dads have responsibilities in the home too. It's not like they just work and they don't have anything to do with child rearing. A dad is essential and irreplaceable in the home. So I think more friendly policies for families, especially for young mothers, but for moms and dads by employers, is important too. The end game of a for-profit, yes, is for profit, but in order to make a profit, and the purpose of that profit is people. So actually the end game of a for-profit business is people. It's serving people. And profit is a mechanism of serving the people who work there and own the business, as well as serving the people. You're giving them a service or a good in return for money. So your job is then to serve people. People over profit in that sense. Profit still matters. We're not against profit. Of course, profit still matters, but people matter the most. And the profit is there to serve the people. So with this mindset, and I think you make for a better, healthier, happier workforce when you're more pro-family in the workforce, when you have better maternity and paternity leaves, when you have more flexible work hours, when there is work from home. I think those things are all good. By the way, Hungary is a very pro-family country. They have a lot of pretty intense pro-family policies that have been successful in helping people say yes to more children and get married. They actually give cash credits for children. I think after your third or your fourth child, you don't have to pay an income tax anymore in Hungary. You're completely tax-free, income tax-free in Hungary. I don't know if I read this wrong. I think they might give a free minivan. Can you look that up, Harris? Do they give free minivans to families? That would be an interesting policy. If you have your fifth child, you get a free. By the fifth child, actually, the minivan is kind of shrinking. You need the Sprinter van, and those are pricey, but that would be an interesting family policy. If you're married, to encourage marriage, if you're married and you have your fifth child, you get a 50% off on a Sprinter van. So no, Hungary, it's not free, but there's a policy idea. Subsidize, instead of subsidizing, I don't know, big pharma, we could subsidize 50% off Sprinter vans for big families. There's an idea. But all of these things I think can be done by both public policy, by employers to foster motherhood, fatherhood, family, to celebrate, to uphold those things. That's the only way out of this mess, in my view. Another thing, though, I need to share is some facts. The reality is moms are happier, according to social data. So this is a really interesting study. This is the Institute for Family Studies. Married mothers are nearly twice as likely to report being very happy compared to single childless women. So here's this data. Married mothers are nearly twice as likely to be very happy compared to single childless women. Women should know this data. This was from March 2025, survey of 3,000 U.S. age women, 25 to 55. Why would this be the case? Well, as a married mother myself, and I'm incredibly privileged and blessed to be a married mother, there is nothing more anchoring for your life than having a husband and children that you're there to love and serve. It is an incredible blessing and gift. It is part of God's design. It's not the path for every woman, of course, but it is the path for most women. And these women, according to survey data, are reporting being very happy twice as much as the women who are not married or without children. So I think women deserve to know this, because today in the media climate, motherhood is just presented as this dregs, as the drag. It's presented as this burden. Babies are presented as ultimately complete, dependent, depleting, just a bag on your back, somebody that you would not want to have a baby. I mean, that's, of course, one of the reasons we have the abortion rate that we have, 3,000 abortions a day. Babies are presented as this incredible net negative. That is how they're presented. And the reality is children are a blessing. They are never a burden. They are a blessing, but we should support families who have that responsibility of raising children. That should be that, by the way, what's the point of our government? What's the point of our businesses? What's the point of any of it if not to support families? Families are the future. Families, where is that? Everything should be supporting the family. So I do think spreading the social data that moms are happier. And now people could say, well, that's correlation, Lila. That's not causation. Maybe those women were naturally happier and they just happened to get married, whatever. But the reality is, I think our design as human beings, our design as women, is that we are designed to be in relationship with other people. And the most natural design for a woman, biologically, spiritually, is ultimately to mother. We are designed to mother. And whether we are not able to mother or we don't choose motherhood biologically because God has a different call in this life for us, some women will not get married. They might choose a celibate vocation. I'm talking spiritually now. They are still called to motherhood. They're still called to nurture and love. But the majority of women are called, I believe, to get married and to be open to life and have children. And that's a beautiful thing. Celebrate that. Make that, talk about that more. Not to say it's, perfect and there's no problems and there's no challenges. Of course, it's responsibility. It's duty. There is a huge opportunity to give of yourself when you get married and have kids. It's not some easy walk in the park. You grow as a human being, but you experience more joy, more purpose, more meaning than I think you would get to experience otherwise if you shirk that call and you reject that call. It's a gift. I remember before I got married, I had a roommate that I was living with in near Palo Alto in Silicon Valley in the Bay Area. Amazing woman. And she lets me share this story publicly because it's pretty personal to her, but she's an amazing person, beautiful Christian woman. Well, she wasn't always following faith. And in her 20s and 30s, she was really hard-charging careerist. So she really was focused on her career. She was working in New York City, actually. This was now decades ago before Mamdani has taken power, but she was a real successful, I think, investment banker. And she said that she prioritized her career more than dating, certainly more than maybe getting married. Career was her focus, and she was very good at her job. And then when she hit like late 30s, early 40s, her biological clock caught up with her, and she was like, oh my gosh, wait a minute, I might not be able to have kids. I want to have kids. What do I do? And she was like scrambling. By this time, around this time, she started to find her faith again. Anyway, she couldn't find a man, a husband. It was difficult. It's very difficult for men to find women and women to find men today, by the way. It's very tough. She was not able to find a man. She was not able to become a mother. She hit 50. When I was living with her, I think she was in her early 50s, past menopausal. That window had passed. And it was very painful for her. And she shared that with me. And she's like, you tell other women to be open to love. Now, being open to love doesn't mean that God guarantees you a husband. It doesn't mean that for sure you're going to get married. And even if you get married, there's not a guarantee you're going to have children. Children are not like, you press a button and a baby pops out. Children are always a gift and they're not promised us, okay? But being open to love, I think, is what we are all called to. And maybe we'll find in our spiritual journeys, being open to love means that God says, no, marriage is not for you. But again, for most of us, it will be that marriage is for you and to be open to getting married. And I think if we had this posture and women were encouraged to have this posture, Mamdani wouldn't have won in New York City to talk about, way down the line political consequence. We would not see the rise in dinks and the rejection of motherhood. I think there would be a different vision and a different life that most women would have and live, because they would be in touch with how they were wired and what God's design was. And so my final thought here is the spiritual reality of all of this. And I think the spiritual reality of all of this is that we are not created randomly. We are created with purpose and we are created with design. And God created the male and female, and then he said, be fruitful and go multiply. And again, that's the call for most of us. And we're going to find the greatest joy and meaning by being faithful to that call. And then the ultimate call of a Christian is to spread the gospel, which is that Jesus Christ came to give us life in full and save us from our sins, and to be proud and joyful in spreading that reality. But the daily, life that we are called to for many of us is going to be marriage and kids. And so if we can, on the right, celebrate that more, present public policy to support that better, I think we're going to see a lot more wins, certainly politically, but most importantly, we're going to see the cultural shift that needs to happen. All right, before we wrap up, I got to show you this. This was something really cute that I saw on Instagram on the dink topic. This is a little bit of a hopeful note here, guys. So the dual income, no kids trend online, as I said, is a thing. People are celebrating no more kids, no more kids. We're just going to be so happy and have our lifestyle. Well, there's also a trend against that trend. Let's take a look at this. This is a couple pretty hilarious Instagram influencers that I like following. This is one of their clips where they're turning in their dink card.
Welcome to Dual Income No Kids Headquarters. How can I? Oh, you two again. Remember what we discussed last time? Just a quick review. No more access to the following: peace and quiet, disposable income, 8 hours of sleep, privacy. Understood. Congratulations, you two. Welcome to Dual Income No Kids Headquarters.
Right.
How can I?
Congratulations. Alexandra and John are their names. They just had a baby. Their first baby actually had passed away after a stillbirth. It was very devastating. And then they had another, and their whole part of their whole content now is celebrating motherhood and fatherhood, which I love. And there's more of that, guys. So there is a trend against this trend of dinks and everything else. There's a lot of reason to be hopeful. Let's celebrate motherhood, celebrate fatherhood. And that's part of the mission of this show. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you all next time.